Hi, welcome to Bridging Principles and Practice, Continuous Improvement in Project Leadership. My name is Rafael Sevilla, and it's a pleasure to be spending time here with you today to go over principles of project management, codes of ethics, and my personal professional goals and project management identity. This is an overview of how all the different parts of today's presentation goes together. I will first build upon stewardship, team, stakeholder, and value, and proceed up to the codes of ethics. I will then share my personal identity as a project manager and then my short and long-term goals. Stewards act responsibly. Stewards act responsibly to carry out activities with integrity, care, and trustworthiness while maintaining compliance with internal and external guidelines. They demonstrate a broad commitment to financial, social, and environmental impacts of the projects they support. Stewardship is an approach to project leadership that is grounded in integrity, care, trustworthiness, and compliance. It requires consistently demonstrating a strong commitment to ensuring positive financial, social, and environmental impacts. This holistic view extends beyond the organization to consider the financial, social, technical, and sustainable impacts project activities and outcomes have on community, society, the environment, and the economy. I believe the cornerstone of effective project leadership is stewardship. When the behaviors and actions of project managers reflect the qualities of stewardship, project team members and other stakeholders are encouraged to behave ethically, communicate honestly, and align with organizational values. When leading with integrity, I practice stewardship by modeling honest and ethical behavior in all of my interactions and communications. By setting a high standard of conduct, I have been able to establish credibility as a role model that can influence others to adhere to a shared commitment to accountability and ethical decision making. I practice stewardship by caring for the well being and interests of my project team members, stakeholders, community, and the environment. Stewardship promotes psychological safety in a way that optimizes performance. I have been able to do this by consistently demonstrating the same attention and care for others as I give personal interests. This level of consideration empowers me to lead with empathy. Trustworthiness is built on genuine integrity and care. Effective stewardship promotes transparent communication. I have learned through personal experience that this is founded on mutual trust and enables the free exchange of information. I have been able to reinforce trustworthiness by effectively anticipating and navigating project challenges. Stewardship promotes compliance with both internal and external project requirements, governance policies, and regulations. This requires sincere dedication to fully understanding what is required to comply and thorough consideration of the holistic impacts project activities and outcomes have on the environment, the community, and the economy throughout the entire project lifecycle. I've been able to promote compliance in my career effectively through research and by strategically identifying the right subject matter experts and engaging them regularly to ask lots of questions and seek their counsel. Bouncing off ideas and listening to their feedback has helped me navigate projects and maintain compliance. Strong stewardship requires project managers maintain awareness beyond the organization to successfully manage relationships, time, finances, materials, equipment, and other resources with integrity, care, trustworthiness, and compliance. I'd like to now share specific examples of how I've been able to fulfill this principle of stewardship and integrate with an artifact I created in this program. In sustainability, in sustainability impact analysis, I created a sustainability management plan that focused on how to reduce the wicked environmental effects and negative social impacts of plastic leakage into our environment. The plan was created in relation to a project I was actively managing at the time. The plan focused on how to reduce the use of single use plastic packaging films and the environmentally responsible selection of packaging materials. The main project deliverable was to implement the equipment, infrastructure, and internal processes needed to migrate a spare parts distribution business from Ohio, where it had operated for 35 years, to Texas with the objectives to optimize operations, cost, and better take care of our customers. As project manager, validating compliance with marketing standards, safety requirements, and positive environmental impacts were key considerations in my decision making process. This included the integration of sustainable development in the selection of materials for product, packaging, equipment, and the associated manufacturing processes. I acted with stewardship when I sought out a corporate graphics artist early on to collaborate with. I included her on all of the project activities related to label design and sought her approval before moving forward to make sure that the branding complied with both the internal marketing standards and the organizational sustainability initiatives. I acted with stewardship to deliver sustainable solutions by taking a holistic view. The result was selecting materials that complied with EPA recycling regulations and local community recycling capabilities. I did so because I believed it was important to weigh the impact of my decisions and how they would have an impact on the environment, the economy, our people, and society. Some examples of these decisions included selecting curbside recyclable plastics of packaging, selecting curbside recyclable cardboard with certified sourcing by the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, acquiring high quality, long life, reusable material bins for internal material handling, acquiring large recycling containers to collect cardboard, outfitting a vertical lift module with a special inverter that converts the elevator's potential energy into electricity and reduces energy consumption by 40%, replacing printed paper instructions with printed QR codes that not only eliminated the need to print work instructions and consume paper, but it also eliminated the non-value add task of folding paper and inserting product packages. The team members were very happy with this improvement. Replacing bubble wrap with a highly sustainable and fully recyclable compostable paper alternative that is made of 100% recycled paper, and replacing kit sticker labels with labels directly printed on the package, reducing the consumption of plastic-based paper labels, the time spent manually printing and applying, and the associated energy consumption and CO2 production. I also fulfilled stewardship by modeling integrity and encouraging honest and ethical behavior. I acted and communicated transparently even when it came to the bad news. Long after the new warehouse had been designed and the project budget had been established, a powerful stakeholder directed me to refinish over 20,000 square feet of the plant's floor for aesthetics. As the project leader, I was committed to promoting project success while also exhibiting genuine care for the well being of the project team, organization, and stakeholders. I pushed back on this demand for two primary reasons: to limit the exposure of employees to the fumes released by the fluorine materials, and to control the project scope, cost, and schedule. I did not want to impose additional work on others or inconvenience them or literally cause them headaches. Because the floor had been evaluated to be mostly in excellent condition, I recommended that we only spot repair the floor where it was needed. Unfortunately, my recommendation was set aside. I immediately communicated my concerns to a wider audience and explained that we would absolutely have to mitigate any potential health impacts. While the fumes would not be toxic, they would be unpleasant and potentially cause headaches or worse. I also communicated that the scope change would run us over the project budget unless we made cuts elsewhere. I cultivated trust with my colleagues by prioritizing the well being of others and exhibiting a diligent oversight of project finances and scheduling. I was able to mitigate the risks of irritating fumes by using an array of industrial exhaust fans to extract fumes out of the building and successfully adjusting the equipment purchase plan to absorb the $120,000 flooring costs without running over budget. As we move on to the next item on today's agenda, the principle of team, I'd like to point out how closely interrelated stewardship is with team. The project teams I work with come from diverse cultural, technical, and personal backgrounds. They are closely and regularly impacted by my stewardship. Throughout the warehouse project, the team progressively coalesced around me as my behavior, communication, and actions modeled integrity and instilled trustworthiness. Over the course of the parts distribution warehouse project, I accomplished this by openly and honestly communicating, engaging and trusting others, caring for the well being and interests of others, and being a catalyst for positive change when I set the direction to align project decisions with the organization's sustainability initiatives. Another instance I can share from my personal experience where these two principles overlap is when I was working on remodeling a 3,000 square foot space of office space. During the project, I carried activities out with integrity, such as when I made sure to add scope to the project to repair the condition of the subfloor that was discovered after tearing out the carpet to be in pretty bad shape. To make sure that the new vinyl flooring would be installed properly, look great, last a long time, and it be enjoyed by all the stakeholders, we went ahead and took care of properly preparing that floor. And the actions taken still were able to deliver the project on time and under budget. Teams are composed of a group of individuals who possess a diverse set of skills, knowledge, and professional experience. When project teams work collaboratively, they can accomplish a shared objective together more effectively and efficiently than individuals can when working alone. Projects are delivered by teams who work within organizational and professional cultures and guidelines. Teams often develop their own local culture over time. Collaborative team environments facilitate alignment with organizational cultures and guidelines, individual team learning and development, and promote optimal contributions to deliver desired outcomes. I believe that the project management principle of team to be central to effective project leadership. It has been my experience in the gas and oil industry and in the manufacturing industry that project teams always have greater impact than any individual, no matter how intelligent, skilled, or experienced that individual is. Team performance is optimized when they share a common set of behavioral norms that align with the organizational culture and professional standards. As time passes, this culture should grow, evolve, and facilitate the shared opportunity to learn and develop together. It is in team collaboration that project management magic happens, and I'd like to share some personal examples to connect the principle with my academic and professional experiences. In leading integrative teams, I produce an artifact titled Leading Integrative Teams with Commitment and Trust. This article discusses how project and team commitment influence the relationship between trust and knowledge sharing within project teams. Knowledge sharing is a team level behavior that thrives when trust, transparency, and openness are encouraged. This is fostered through social connection and a collective sense of commitment. Commitment to both the team and the project's objectives facilitates a greater team effort, a sense of ownership, and promotes an environment where cooperation subdues competition. Projects have a better probability of success when teams operate within a shared culture. Because teams are made up of individuals who wield different skills, knowledge, experiences, cultures, ages, religions, political beliefs, and personal circumstances, a shared culture where trust abounds is imperative for being able to work effectively and efficiently. Conversely, when trust is low, knowledge sharing is stifled, and the team suffers consequences such as poor performance, toxic culture, and a lack of personal learning and development. Team commitment, trust, and knowledge sharing are all components of the organizational culture I am fortunate to work within currently, and I've experienced how the fulfillment of team can efficiently conquer project challenges while maintaining alignment with organizational guidelines and simultaneously developing the individuals and teams. A few years ago, I inherited an ongoing project during my first year with my current employer. The main deliverables were to implement a modular vertical lift machine that you'll see in the video and integrate it with our Oracle ERP system to automate material transactions. The machine's function is high density inventory storage that makes use of vertical space to shrink down the footprint of material storage. This was the first module to be deployed at our facility and within our organization. As such, we had a unique opportunity for individual and team development. We also had the opportunity as a new team working together to develop a collaborative environment and to build our own local team culture upon the foundation of Emerson's organizational culture and engineering guidelines. The project aimed to deliver continuous improvement through innovation, and it was designed to support our people and enhance our ability to meet customers' needs. My involvement was initially very limited. I had been tapped by a senior leader for a promotion and was splitting time between Massachusetts and Texas while I explored the opportunity. When I determined that the job was not for me, I became more involved with the project. Acting as project manager, I set direction for the team by first strategically assigning roles and responsibilities based on each team member's technical skills, availability, and strengths. This was done to optimize each team's members' contributions to deliver the desired project outcomes. For example, because of David's engineering background, I assigned him to supervise the construction of the machine and support compliance with all internal administrative tasks. Because of Bob's seasoned experience and familiarity with the product line, I assigned him to lead the development and approval of inventory strategy so the parts could be properly grouped together and minimize the amount of trays that needed to be pulled in order to more efficiently fill orders. The result was being able to pull a job in under 4 minutes, which was a significant improvement from the previous process. Because of Cherie's passion for quality and strong organizational skills, I assigned her to designate how parts would be protected and stored inside of the machine. Because of Brandon's previous experience working on the team that implemented Oracle originally, and Chad's experience with inventory processes, I assigned them to run setup and conduct end-to-end testing of the interface programs we needed to communicate with Oracle. During team meetings and project status updates, I promoted team and project commitment by reminding the team we were working to improve inventory accuracy and deliver a key piece of our facility's digital transformation. By connecting our actions with the purpose, I emphasize our common unifying objective. As we progressed through the project, we started developing our own team culture based on everyone's contributions and background with the company. Team lunches and Saturday working sessions all aided in our team's development of trust that facilitated this collaboration and knowledge sharing. In the end, the team delivered the project successfully, and each team member's contributions were optimized, I believe. By adapting to the organizational culture and promoting the development of our own team culture, our team has continued to develop, mature, and strengthen to this current day. I believe the principal team is closely interrelated with the next project management principle on today's agenda, stakeholders. The overlap here starts with the fact that project team members form a group of stakeholders, individuals who happen to have direct interest and influence in the project's activities and outcomes, while also being uniquely empowered to affect and be affected by the project. Recently, I had the good fortune of getting approved to hire a few people to my team in the role of automation specialists. The main charter of the role is to support digital transformation, and as such, needed a little bit more firepower to increase my team's capacity for delivering these projects. The new team members were internal candidates who have brought a dimension of diversity to the team, and now I'm actively working with them on a daily basis to support their development and learning as we grow a team culture and grow our ability to engage stakeholders and contribute to project success. Stakeholders are at the center of every project. They are the individuals, groups, or organizations who are affected by or can affect project activities and outcomes. Project managers should engage stakeholders proactively and to the degree needed to contribute to project success and customer satisfaction. Stakeholders influence projects' performance and outcomes. Project teams serve other stakeholders by engaging them, and stakeholder engagement should be proactive to advance the delivery of value. My academic and professional experiences throughout the program has solidified my belief that project success and setbacks are constructed one day at a time and one stakeholder engagement at a time, either through diligence or negligence. Effective stakeholder engagement entails proactive, continuous, and strategic communication and interaction. It begins with understanding each stakeholder and their respective level of interest and influence, and then by considering their needs, availability, perceptions, expectations, and communication preferences. I'd like to share some examples of how this level of understanding facilitated productive decision making so that I could properly manage stakeholders' influence, harness their actions, and foster collaboration to achieve the desired positive project outcomes. In developing the plan and project management, I created the project charter and scope memo for the Norfolk drone delivery pilot project. The main deliverable was the implementation of a drone delivery service for prescriptions in the Norfolk, Virginia area. In this document, I formally identify stakeholders, define their roles, provide background, business case, objectives, deliverables, scope and constraints, organizational structure, milestones, outline risks, and introduce the project strategy. In doing so, I promote alignment amongst the stakeholders with the strategic goals to innovate operations and enhance customer experience. By providing this clear communication to all stakeholders, I also establish authority and legitimacy as the project manager and position stakeholders to serve others through engagement. For example, for the mobile application deliverable, I specify the target of having a 90% customer satisfaction rate. This metric requires that the stakeholders engage the customers to uncover what they need to have consistently positive user experiences and advances the creation of value. In my professional practice, I recently inherited a project that had gone a little off the rails. Our quality department had long since needed to expand the capacity of their metrology lab used for validating parts using metrology equipment. The original project manager had got the appropriations request approved and issued orders to multiple vendors, but had done so while operating in a vacuum of sorts and failed to engage stakeholders effectively. As a result, The scope of work was incomplete, and the project was running 7 months late due to a shared lack of understanding amongst the stakeholders regarding what needed to be done and when. When I was asked to get involved, I began by identifying the primary stakeholders and talking with them to understand the purpose of the project through their eyes. This gave me insight about how they would be impacted and who would be impacted. By engaging them proactively and listening to their needs and expectations, I came to understand who needed to contribute to make the project a success. And I was also able to identify what additional work needed to be included, make the necessary adjustments, and shop quotes to work it into the budget. I next engaged the finance department to investigate project spending, invoicing, and understand where we were at on the budget. This was challenging due to the poor records that were kept and the miscommunication. But in the end, we were able to clarify the requirements that facilitated not only the finance department's engagement, but resolution from a vendor that had not yet shipped one of our orders. Through deliberate stakeholder engagement, I was able to turn the project around, facilitating two-way communication between stakeholders. This led to productive and coordinated contributions amongst the stakeholders. And now, after investing about 3 months, I think we're about 2 weeks away from getting sprinklers installed, new air conditioning unit to control the climate, and get the team back up and running in the new space. Effectively engaging stakeholders is also closely connected to the principle of value. Project value is created by the collective work, efforts, communications, and interactions of stakeholders. One of the deliverables of the parts warehouse project I mentioned was the introduction of autonomous mobile robots. This was a learning objective for the team, and it was also a desirable project outcome to realize some efficiencies in the delivery of material and the elimination of non-value added task type of work. This required constant positive engagement with the stakeholders, consideration of the work ergonomics and the impact on them, to create value in an iterative fashion while developing the process, implementing the technology, supporting their training. Next principle on the agenda is value, and it is fulfilled by the continuous evaluation and adjustment of project alignment to business objectives and intended benefits and value. Value includes both tangible and intangible benefits delivered to stakeholders by project activities and outcomes, and it is the ultimate indicator of project success. Benefits that contribute Value and the benefits that contribute to value can be defined in quantitative or qualitative terms. And when project teams focus on project outcomes, they support the intended value creation. Project teams should evaluate progress and adapt to maximize the expected value. One artifact I created in the program that aligns with the principle of value was the Remco case study titled Understanding Implementation Risks of Agile Methodology. In it, I discussed that a well defined value proposition is a critical component of both waterfall and agile project management methodologies. By beginning with identifying the internal and external value the project will create, Remco project managers, executive management, project team members, and stakeholders can all share an understanding overall project objectives. Value is created in increments using agile methodology by continually evaluating the value being created by project tasks and activities so approaches can be quickly adapted when corrective action is needed. Several years ago, I came across a software product that facilitates the creation of digital work guides to establish standard training approaches for manufacturing operations. The platform also facilitates the approval process for new documents or revisions and delivers it to users that should be trained on the content. It also facilitates easily tracking competencies for managers. The traditional approach of one person teaching another in succession rendered diminishing returns, and I believe Dazuki could overcome this. Where I currently work, it quickly became evident that we were facing several workforce challenges. A significant amount of knowledge leaving the building as employees retired, and a high turnaround for new employees. I thought Dazuki could help us quickly capture specialized knowledge and facilitate the delivery and access of that information to people that needed it. This seemed to align nicely with primary business objectives to perform activities of digital transformation, continuous improvement, and optimizing operations. The intended benefits and value to Zuki were clear to me. I could help employees all be trained to the same standard, held accountable to that standard, and I'll be able to easily access these digital work guides whenever they need it. After a year of back and forth with corporate over strategy, cost, approvals, and licensing, we are now all aligned in launching the software platform in June. As I have continued to plan for this project and engage with stakeholders to capture requirements, I continue to create value by preparing for the launch. And it is built by building out the framework of the Jizuki site, automating the distribution and facilitating access to it on demand. By focusing on the outcomes needed to align with stakeholders' definition of project success, I am facilitating the project team to support intended benefits that lead to value creation. Another instance where I fulfilled the principal value as a project manager was during the parts warehouse implementation of equipment and infrastructure. I held weekly meetings with upper management to report on project status, communicate obstacles, and evaluate how aligned project activities were with the business objectives. I would update presentation slides to show where each deliverable was, what actions we had just completed, and what the project team was currently doing. I flowed these tasks into a visual Gantt chart that tracked the percentage of tasks we were completing on time according to the schedule. This quantitative metric was a means of communicating value creation to the stakeholders in a very visual way that promoted clarity regarding how things were going. The principle of value is closely interconnected with systems thinking because it is the effective and iterative creation of value. It supports the maintaining of a holistic perspective of the different domains, dynamic interactions, and interdependencies. When the goal of a project is to deliver sustained value, systems thinking leads the project manager to consider long term impacts and to recognize the need to engage stakeholders throughout the project system and align their definitions of value with the project outcomes. Systems thinking is a holistic recognition, evaluation, and response to dynamic circumstances within and surrounding the project to positively affect project performance. A project is a system and it has interdependent and interacting domains of activity. Employing system thinking entails taking a holistic view of how project parts interact with each other and with external systems. Because these systems are constantly changing, they require consistent attention. In project management theory, I developed my own personal philosophy of project management where I emphasize the importance of systems thinking principle. In it, I write high levels of self awareness and situational awareness are powerful allies for a project manager. They aid in negotiating with and in motivating stakeholders to cooperate and collaborate. This awareness is fundamental to a systems view because it allows me to recognize the project environment and its different influences. The dynamics of communication and information pathways are optimized in systems thinking frameworks where the needs of stakeholders are thoroughly considered. This exposes the interdependencies and interactions between all stakeholders in order to more effectively strategize and drive actions. Last year, I was asked to remodel an office space and increase the seating capacity, the number of cubicles, offices, and expand a conference room. I would have to coordinate the phased displacement of personnel to facilitate demo and construction. Additionally, we would then have to tear down all the existing cubicles, remove the carpet, prep the floor, install flooring, and all new furniture. All these activities were interdependent, and this is where systems thinking came into play. I had to understand how each step of the project would impact the stakeholders, their work, the business, and our vendors. So I worked to minimize disruption by setting up a new workspace for them and kept everyone informed of the project progress to monitor any deviation from the plan. As we got to pulling back the carpet, we found that the foundation slab was in poor repair. I responded immediately, speaking with the flooring company to understand all the options and best recommendations, and found this solution was to use more cement and floor level to stabilize it. I communicated with all the affected parties and expressed empathy for the inconvenience. While I was expecting complaints, I instead received agreement and understanding. Nobody minded being displaced a little longer and working out of a conference room because they knew it meant the work would be done right. This support was then reinforced when another interdependent component of the project system, the new cubicles, were scheduled to deliver late. I was able to get the extra scope of work done while we waited for the new cubicles, and once they were installed, the final product was beautiful. I'm really proud of how I took a holistic view of how the different parts of the project and the stakeholders all interacted with the external systems. System thinking was a principle I fulfilled throughout the parts warehouse project as I strategically engaged stakeholders, not only to understand the interdependencies between project deliverables and tasks related to preparing the facility and implementing the infrastructure, but to understand the working relationships and expectations amongst project team members. One example is when I considered what actions I'd have to take with all the new infrastructure to maintain an A+ rating compliance with our insurance company. When the installation of warehouse racking systems and vertical lift modules, I discovered a considerable amount of work would have to be done to upgrade a large portion of our sprinkler system and to provide the adequate coverage. By monitoring the change in dynamic circumstances, I was able to positively affect project performance by considering the different domains of activity, understanding how they interact with each other, and coordinating contractors, internal parties, and activities to produce the desired outcome. In the end, we upgraded the risers, valves, main supply lines, branch lines, and sprinklers to comply with FM Global standards. In the end, we were able to stay on schedule, under budget, and minimize disruption to existing operations. The principle of systems thinking is closely connected with the principle of leadership because project managers must be able to establish authenticity and exhibit the ability to effectively identify and anticipate how project decisions and activities will influence outcomes. Systems thinking empowers project leaders to develop robust strategies that help navigate uncertainty, overcome obstacles, and problem solve. Leadership and systems thinking go hand in hand whenever a project manager effectively engages stakeholders so that by uncovering their needs, expectations, feelings, and opinions, the project manager can adapt approaches to avoid setbacks and can make informed decisions that promote positive project outcomes. Effective project leadership requires project managers demonstrate and adapt leadership styles and behaviors to support individual and team needs. Effective leadership promotes project success and contributes to positive project outcomes. Any project team member can demonstrate leadership behaviors because it is different than authority. When effective leaders adapt their style to the situation and recognize differences in motivation amongst team members, they are complying with this principle. Leaders demonstrate desired behavior in areas of honesty, integrity, and ethical conduct. In developing the plan and project management, I created the key assessment, leadership growth essay, where I reflect on my personal leadership development and talk about how through the projects I have participated in and led have taught me to the importance of rooting my style in honest and diligent communication. This builds trust and proactive risk management to demonstrate the same behavior I wish to influence project team members to adopt. As I look back on my many experiences and try to connect them with the principle of leadership, I realize that my leadership journey has been about a conscious movement from a theoretical understanding of principles to the very practical and sometimes challenging application of those principles. I will now share some examples of how fostering clear communication, leading with empathy, and ethical behavior diligently build trust have proved to be effective in promoting positive project outcomes. During the summer of 2020, the bearing manufacturer I was working for decided to transfer manufacturing operations for a tire product line from China to Mexico. By nearshoring, the main goal was to protect the supply chain and minimize impacts from the pandemic. In order to do this, a significant amount of work had to be done in a short amount of time, and we had to do this all the while not being fully staffed, dealing with shortened work weeks because of company-wide furloughs, having a few inexperienced people on the team, missing people who were battling COVID themselves, and working with a disengaged business development manager. Oh, and we still had to keep up with the normal daily business operations. I immediately adapted my behaviors to fit the team's needs and took on a leadership role to promote the desired positive outcomes of the nearshoring project. I did this first by broadening the scope of my influence. While my engineering role was dedicated to grinding processes, I had never missed the opportunity to learn about other processes like machining, heat treating, coating, and assembly. I had a few people on my team who shared this personal passion and interest to learn. I leveraged their motivation and as I had one engineer train another junior engineer how to use a software program to create machining programs. I tasked an intern with collecting data and supporting communication between departments. And by defining these roles and responsibilities and adapting to the circumstances, I was able to take on a leadership role that resulted in getting all the work done. But it did not go as smoothly as I had hoped. At one point, I had stressed the importance of getting a certain labor rate correct to the business development manager and explained that before we embark on a particular portion of the project, if he could just make sure that the rate was right. He assured me, and soon after completing that deliverable, he came back and said that the rate had changed. I knew this would discourage my whole short-handed engineering team in the plant, so I approached them with honest empathy about how they felt and expressed also my frustration and disappointment. But as we adapted to these circumstances, we were still able to complete all of the work on a really tight schedule. The principle of leadership is closely connected with the principle of tailoring because I have learned that adapting or tailoring my leadership style is just as, if not more important, than tailoring my project management approach when I come to understand my project team members and stakeholders' needs, expectations, feelings, and personalities. I also come to understand what kind of leadership style will fit the circumstances. Sometimes that's leading with an inspiration style or a coaching style or a democratic style. In a similar way, adjusting the project management approach to the project context and needs of stakeholders increases the probability of project success. One such instance was in the summer of 2023. I had been managing the parts warehouse project for about 14 months. And with much of the equipment and infrastructure in place, it was time to onboard the new warehouse employees. However, they were yet to hire managers and supervisors for them. While part of me felt overwhelmed with my current workload, I felt responsible for making sure the team was trained and prepared to be successful. I had put everything into place after all. So, being aware that the stakes were high and considering the circumstances, I tailored my approach to both leadership and project management. I took on a little bit more of a leadership role to provide guidance and training to support their development. I made a point to actively listen and incorporate their perspectives into my ongoing project management decisions. I think they appreciated my enthusiasm, empathy, and encouragement. I think most of all, they appreciated the clear direction I provided because they had been used to a chaotic and disorganized style of leadership. As time passed, they became more and more committed to the vision for the warehouse. I developed a mutual respect with these people and realized positive project outcomes together. Several encouraged me to apply to the warehouse manager position, and though I was honestly flattered, I was professional on another trajectory. When the new manager and supervisors were hired, I did what I could to facilitate their transition and eased myself out of that leadership role that I had been providing. Tailoring is the next principle on our agenda. And in project management, tailoring is a context-based approach to project development design. This means customizing the project management approach based on the specific project objectives, stakeholders, governance, and the environment using just enough process to achieve the desired outcome while maximizing value, managing costs, and enhancing speed. Each project is unique. As such, project success is based on adapting to the unique context of the project to determine the most appropriate methods of producing the desired outcomes. Tailoring the approach is iterative and therefore is a continuous process throughout the project. In the thoughtful project, aligning purpose with approach, I created a program artifact titled Disneyland Paris, a case study analysis of cultural and environmental factors. This case study presents a compelling example of how the lack of tailoring can negatively impact a project. Disney's initial strategy in Euro Disney was not to adapt their approach, project design, and decisions to the stakeholders' needs, expectations, or interests. An assumption was made that the success achieved in other countries would translate easily by just copy pasting the approach. Because Disney initially failed to consider the difference between cultures and tailor the project, the park was not well received. It wasn't until they pivoted to a tailored approach that the project had success. For example, they made the change of serving alcohol to conform with the European cultural norms and changing the name to Disneyland Paris to reflect the local cultural identity. All these efforts of continuous improvement contributed to the ultimate project success. Last year, I was asked to manage a project for the shipping department. The main deliverable was to replace a 40-year shipping line that had frequent mechanical problems and downtime. With all the new equipment selected, the idea was that we would be more productive and more ergonomic in the process. This project was especially unique because it had been done in an area of the plant where all of our finished assemblies are packed and processed for shipment. It's a critical step in generating revenue and meeting our plant KPI metrics. Throughout the project, I fulfilled the principle of tailoring by adapting my project management approach to context, stakeholders, and environment in order to maximize value and promote project success. Because the appropriations request totaled $475,000, I had to present to a capital governance body known as the Machine Council. This group is composed of trusted and experienced experts throughout the company's network. While preparing for the formal presentation, where I would be asked any and all relevant questions, I performed a significant amount of research to clearly state the value and benefits the project was creating. I needed to present the current and future state processes, technical equipment specifications, production data to convey volume and demand, and financial analysis. I adapted my messaging to this highly technical audience to meet their level of understanding and satisfy their expectations. After approval, the next iteration of the project was to prepare the stakeholders and the facilities with a clear understanding of what would be happening, how that would impact them, and for some, what they would be asked to contribute in order to deliver the project successfully. At this point, I shifted from a highly traditional and time-consuming approach of project management with a technical communication style to a more conversational and hybrid approach to engage stakeholders where they were and influence their commitment to the project's success. I conducted informal daily stand-up meetings to track priorities and facilitate alignment amongst the key stakeholders. I did so because it was a more efficient approach and better fit for the audience and circumstances. Instead of a conference room, I was now operating out on the production floor in the shipping department in a high-paced environment where I was afforded little availability to the stakeholders. At the next iteration of the project, implementation, I employed a more agile approach to maintain flexibility, promote collaboration, and focus on continuous improvement. Tailoring the project management approach in this way facilitated innovation as we were able to stay focused on daily tasks, evaluate progress, and take corrective actions to drive iterative improvements. The principle of tailoring, I believe, is also closely connected with the principle of quality, because quality is created when the project deliverables comply with stakeholder expectations and requirements. By tailoring or adapting approaches to best fit stakeholders, a project manager is essentially utilizing the appropriate processes and methodologies that fit the project context and in turn integrate quality with project deliverables by aligning with those expectations of the stakeholders. Tailoring also empowers flexibility to adapt quickly which promotes quality by maintaining a focus on meeting acceptance criteria. Another example from a professional experience that embodies the principle of tailoring quality is actually an ongoing project in the shipping department, where we're trying to reduce the amount of finished goods we have in inventory that we are holding for customers. Through continuous improvement, quality is achieved by making adjustments to align with the stakeholder requirements. I have tailored my approach to use just enough process, methods, and templates to drive the team towards the project outcomes, again, because their availability is low. The primary stakeholders must maintain momentum shipping products, and I cannot take them away from that work. So my approach has been to rely on opportune communication and stand-up meetings twice a week to discuss our action items. This hybrid approach leverages the concept of project backlog in a simplified format to facilitate quick meetings and clear understanding amongst the team. In parallel, I'm pursuing the development of some Power BI report dashboards to help the shipping team members get the right information they need, built with quality, instead of having to navigate through several different systems. By adjusting the approach to the stakeholders' availability and circumstances of their role, I have minimized disruption while still pursuing the ongoing continuous improvement efforts and building quality into the project deliverables. Quality, the project management principle, is fulfilled by maintaining a focus on quality that produces deliverables that meet project objectives and align to the needs, uses, and acceptance requirements set forth by relevant stakeholders. Project quality entails satisfying stakeholders' expectations and fulfilling project product requirements. Quality focuses on meeting acceptance criteria for deliverables and entails ensuring project processes are appropriate and as effective as possible. My analysis of Tom DeMarco's The Deadline discusses a fictional project landscape where Webster Tompkins, a project manager who gets kidnapped and taken to an imaginary country, works to integrate quality in project work to promote successful outcomes for the dictator who kidnapped him. He did this by maintaining a firm focus on proactive risk management, employing lean methodologies to avoid wasted time and effort, and developing a project plan that effectively built quality into the project tasks to prevent defects instead of waiting to inspect for defects and correcting them only after detection. The author demonstrates through the character how managing project quality effectively through adaptive approaches and strategic thinking can drive positive stakeholder engagement and promote alignment with acceptance criteria. During the parts warehouse project, I sent out a bid request to a few companies who sell and install warehouse racking systems. I shared the specifications, floor plan, and general accessory requirements to comply with the company standards and ES&H policies. First, I had to understand what was required to satisfy stakeholder expectations, so I engaged the different managers and subject matter experts. Through both informal interactions and formal meetings, the discussions we had gave me the valuable insight needed to incorporate quality into the project deliverable. Another dimension of the quality that needed to be produced in the deliverable was the availability of excess capacity to store the current inventory and future growth. This was both important to the business itself and the corporate political optics for influential stakeholders who were watching from afar. It was also important that the racking system looked the part. Our company's standard color for this type of infrastructure was a particular tone of gray, and I had communicated this to the vendor during a site visit. As we approached the ship date, I was preparing to coordinate the construction commissioning of the system. I called the vendor to confirm one last time that our order was in compliance of all these requirements that I had provided. It was at this point in time that we discovered that the racks had not been painted gray, but instead their standard orange color. I pleaded for corrective action and the vendor arranged for the racks to be repainted. I thought the disaster had been averted. To my dismay, when the racking system components showed up on a few flatbed trailers, I was immediately disappointed. While the order was complete and correct, the paint job was of a very poor quality. Every rack looked as though a giant with Cheeto fingers, so to say, had handled them. You could see the previous orange paint shimmering through the gray. While the racks would meet the quality requirements for functional performance, they would definitely not meet the stakeholders' expectations for aesthetics. I immediately advised the vendor that we could not accept them and communicated the situation with all internal stakeholders to project team members. After some back and forth with the vendor, we were able to negotiate a resolution and swap out the poor quality racking components. While this ended up adding some cost and time to the project schedule for this deliverable, the buffer I had built into the project schedule and budget allowed the project to proceed successfully and ensure that the deliverable would meet conformity requirements. My focus on meeting the acceptance criteria for this deliverable ended up delivering the right level of quality in an effective manner. A few years ago, I came to understand that our business was using several different label programs throughout the facility for different reasons. After some discovery, I came to understand that one of the programs was obsolete and another was cumbersome to use. I saw this as a good opportunity for continuous improvement, and because I would have to implement a solution for the parts warehouse, I decided to shop around for a better product. Before I talked with vendors and shopped quotes, I collected feedback from users regarding what they would like the software to do and what experiences that they had. There was a consensus that the software should be rather effortless to use, customizable, and be connected to live data tables so that whenever a change was made in the system, the label would still print with that accurate information. In this case, I built quality into the project by maintaining my focus on how to meet the objectives that would align with the needs, uses, cases, and acceptance requirements set forth by the relevant stakeholders. And so, as I started the project, delivering a live database of label information and part pictures, the creation of label templates, and tying in the data to allow users to easily find what they needed, I was able to create a I was able to implement a modern software solution that could be used with all the printers, new or old. We started with 3 printers, added another 5, added another 5, and now we're up to 13. The principle of quality is closely connected with complexity because quality focuses on meeting acceptance requirements as defined by stakeholders. I have learned working as a project manager that complexity can threaten quality if not properly addressed. Complexity introduces risk and uncertainty and interdependencies that must be continuously monitored and mitigated to protect project quality. By employing continuous improvement, quality can be created and complexity can be effectively responded to. One example of this from my professional career was when I was preparing the facility to implement the new parts warehouse. Creating 22,000 square feet of clear space in a plant where there was none, and all the activities it entailed, presented emerging complexity at every turn. Whether it was trying to land infrastructure in spaces it wasn't originally designed to fit in, or dealing with the external corporate politics of moving a value stream out of the way, I had to remain vigilant in how to manage communication and support team members to deliver project deliverables with inherent quality. The tight timeline for this portion of the project and considerable undertaking it would not be forgiving if quality was lacking. Complexity is achieved through the continual evaluation to navigate the complexity in the project so that approaches and plans enable the project team to successfully navigate the project lifecycle. Complexity is a result of human behavior, system interactions, uncertainty, and ambiguity. Complexity can emerge at any point during the project. Complexity can be introduced by events or conditions that affect value, scope, communications, stakeholders, risk, and technical innovation. Project teams can stay vigilant in identifying elements of complexity and the use of a variety of methods to reduce the amount of impact from that complexity. In leading integrative teams, I worked with a team to develop a case study where a real estate marketing firm was trying to achieve a very complex project. The deliverables were to renovate new headquarters, relocate the business to those headquarters, and simultaneously modernize their network infrastructure. As we approached this case study, we found ways to continually monitor the emerging complexities and maintain a close grip of the interdependencies between the different project tracks. Transparent communication and knowledge sharing and proactive discovery of emerging complexity all contributed to a successful implementation in this case study. In 2020, I embarked on leading a project to completely reorganize a manufacturing plant in Reynosa, Mexico. The plant was approximately 150,000 square feet, with about 2/3 of that space being consumed by machine tools. Because the business had grown significantly in a piecewise manner over the years, the plant had also expanded little by little, and this had led to a very inefficient flow of material. So I began to collaborate with my colleagues to create the ideal layout of the plant and plan the sequence movements of every single machine and their supporting infrastructure. The aim of the project was to strategically organize machines into cells that would maximize productivity and minimize the travel between each step in the manufacturing process. One side of the building would start with raw material, and the other side would have a finished, assembled, laser marked, and packaged product. Nothing would have to be transported back and forth. The project was ambitious. It had to be done while maintaining normal daily operations. Additionally, it was challenging because a lot of the equipment was very old and unique. We had to dispose of ancient screw machines that had been cannibalized for parts over the years. We had to plan to move equipment weighing upwards of 15,000 pounds and have all the needed power and compressed air in place to minimize the machine downtime. We had to move mist extractors to maintain the air quality clean in the facility, and we had to relocate induction heat treat machines with special power deliveries. As project manager, I had to continually monitor and evaluate every task so that I could help the project team navigate all the emerging complexity throughout the project. Finding out a machine tool maker, the complexity came from different sources, such as finding out a machine tool maker had locked their machine by GPS. So after moving it and plugged it in, we couldn't get it going. I had to bring in a certified technician from out of state to commission it. This unexpected obstacle added scope and cost to the project and delayed the task from being completed. To mitigate the negative impacts on production, I figured out how to distribute the planned workload to other machines and assign an engineer to program them accordingly. Another source of complexity was having to cancel a planned machine movement because of an urgent emerging need for the production team to keep it up and running. When this happened, I met with the maintenance team to shift our priorities to move other equipment while not negatively impacting the sequence of the movements. All these examples introduced complexity into the project and provided the opportunity for continuous learning for me and the team. We got better and faster at adapting to the complexity, and I further developed my ability to understand dynamic system interactions and how those systems were impacting people. I monitored behaviors, perspectives, and the needs of project team members and other stakeholders to make the right adjustments on a daily basis. And all this eventually led to a successful project delivery. In another professional experience, complexity was introduced to the project when key project members either left the company or were promoted into other roles. These changes happened rather abruptly and initially introduced uncertainty to the project. The project team and I were uncertain about how their project responsibilities would be completed, what progress they had been made since our last meeting, and how these project team changes would impact team members and project work. One of the individuals left, but had casually shared with me in conversation what they had been thinking about leaving about a month prior. While it was still a surprise and I had no idea they were leaving, I started working a little less dependent on their responsibilities. For example, they had been tasked with evaluating the ergonomic design of certain warehouse processes and equipment that was to be set up. I chose at that point in time to start engaging another engineer and personnel from the ESH department to keep this task on track and prevent any delays in getting the new equipment and tools approved and commissioned and ready to train the team for operations. In this case, I fulfilled the principle of complexity by understanding how one person on the team might impact the rest of the project system and taking a step to adapt to possibility that would have otherwise caused issues. In doing so, I also complied with the next interrelated project management principle of risk. Continually evaluating the exposure to risk, both opportunities and threats, to maximize positive impacts and minimize negative impacts to the projects and its outcomes. Individual and overall risk can impact projects. Risk can be positive, and they're known as opportunities, or negative, known as threats. Risks are addressed continually throughout the project. An organization's risk attitude, appetite, and threshold influence how risk is addressed. And risk responses should be appropriate for the significance of the risk, cost-effective, realistic within the project approach and context, agreed to by relevant stakeholders, and owned by one responsible person. During the layout optimization project I did in Mexico, I had to continue to evaluate the project team and stakeholders' risk exposure to identify and mitigate threats and to recognize and leverage opportunities. Additionally, I had to understand what our team's appetite for risk was by establishing strong communication with leadership and the project team, and only moving forward when agreement had been reached by the relevant stakeholders. I'll come to this back to this example in a second, but I want to integrate it with an artifact I made in the program. In stakeholder management, we as a team made a stakeholder register for the Heathrow Terminal 5 implementation. This register considered not only the levels of influence and interests of the stakeholders, but also their needs, expectations, communication preferences, availability, scope of responsibility, all in an effort to strategically identify and detect very early any issues with the project. In retrospect, one of the key issues with the Heathrow Terminal 5 project in the real world was that there was this lack of effective, strong communication with leadership and the project team. Fear from the project leaders' fear of the C-suite at the company led them to give good news and be afraid to share the real deal. As I shift back to my professional experience, I want to go ahead and point out that when it came to move the Campfire grinding cell, it was not just the machines we had to relocate, it was the centralized machining coolant filling system that they ran on. This system had 600 gallons reservoir, and the system circulated clean coolant supply to all the machines by removing the grinding chips or swarf trap oil out of the coolant. This was a critical system for the cell, and if it caused any delays or issues getting the system operational in its new home, it was a big risk, negatively impacting the company's production revenue and employees. I communicated this to my leadership because initially they thought it was a very straightforward task. I explained to them the risk involved, and in order to mitigate the risk, I carefully coordinated the production schedule and the sequence of equipment installations to minimize negative impacts. I also collaborated with the maintenance team to devise a cost-effective contingency plan that would have allowed us to bypass the central filter system on a machine-by-machine basis and operate the equipment even on a limited basis using other means of filtering. I also, by monitoring risk, was actually able to identify and leverage an opportunity that while we had this planned machine downtime, we could schedule preventative maintenance to promote the possibility of project success. The decision was I made the decision and lobbied to go ahead and overhaul and upgrade the filter system's mechanical and electrical systems at this time. So we purchased and replaced the pumps, motors, other wear components, and upgraded all the sensors and valves, and even the electrical PLC control. The filter system was then commissioned successfully and on schedule. In this example, I fulfilled the principle of risk by mitigating the project threats and taking advantage of the opportunities in a realistic manner within the project context. During the project to implement and pilot the first modular vertical lift module for our Baumann product line, the principle of risk played a prominent role. A lot of uncertainty existed. No one in our organization had attempted it before, but our organization had developed a very healthy threshold for risk tolerance and strong methods to address it. I knew very clearly that we would want to execute the project in a way that did not negatively impact the materials and production teams from doing their jobs efficiently. As project manager, I held meetings dedicated to discussions about risk so that we could take our collective perspectives and anticipate the threats and identify opportunities. Two examples I'd like to share of these risks included the Oracle interface programs not functioning properly. This could expose us to the possibility of inventory accuracy issues and lead to additional work to correct errors and delays to our assembly line and customer deliveries. This overall risk could potentially devastate project success, but fortunately, our organization had a familiarity with consistently evaluating risks. This made it much easier for me as project manager to get support from the project team to engage in managing the risk by following a regimented testing protocol to pretty much guarantee functionality once the time came to go live. Another risk turned out to be a significant opportunity. The project team and prominent stakeholders and I were all initially concerned with the time it would take to pull parts out of the machine. We were all concerned how long it would take and whether we could do so quickly enough to keep up with the needed pace of work. This presented a tremendous opportunity. I collaborated to determine what our daily target was based on recent historical data and applied a safety factor to understand our time limits. Once the machine was in place, I assigned a project team member to do some testing and take some time studies. As I continued to validate our exposure to this risk, I realized we had a great opportunity to group common parts together and minimize the quantity of trays that had to be delivered to complete tasks. This strategy proved to be cost-effective, appropriate for the risk significance, and agreed to by the project team. Bob, as I mentioned previously, was assigned as a tenured leader with a strong background and familiarity with the project line to guide us in this effort. I was able to effectively work with Bob to maximize the positive impacts of his efforts while mitigating the risks that we had originally confronted. In so doing, I also align very nicely, I think, with a interconnected project management principle of adaptability and resiliency. And in this case, our structured approach that did not expose us to the risks without managing it in a phased-in manner ensured that we could adapt to changes quickly and that we could be resilient to any negative impacts, absorb those impacts, and recuperate from the setbacks. Adaptability and resiliency are built into organizations and project teams' approaches to help the project accommodate change, recover from setbacks, and advance the work of the project. Adaptability is the ability to respond to changing conditions. Resiliency is the ability to absorb impacts and to recover quickly from a setback or failure. A focus on outcomes rather than outputs facilitates this adaptability. In PMG 502, the Thoughtful Project, Aligning Purpose with Approach, I reviewed a case study of the Haunted Mansion and the analysis of changing teams and shifting priorities. This gave me a lot of insight into this particular project management principle, because while the implementation of this new attraction in Disneyland had to endure conflicting priorities, the changing of project teams, they were able to recuperate in the end and deliver one of the most successful attractions the park had ever had and long-lasting attractions by putting into practice adaptability and resiliency. In the project, they adapted their design decisions, their organizational team structure, and were able to absorb the project impacts and delays and cost overruns to recuperate from those setbacks. As I move on, I'd like to go ahead and discuss a similar example on a much smaller scale from my work. Earlier, I discussed the parts warehouse project deliverable of the warehouse racking system. Another interdependent deliverable here was to implement Malin turret trucks, also known as swing reach forklifts. These pieces of mobile equipment are used to store and retrieve pallets from the warehouse racking systems up to a 28-foot elevation. And unfortunately, they had some serious lead time, about 2 years after an order was issued. This part of the project was a good example of adaptability and resiliency because I had to take approaches on to accommodate the change, recover from setbacks, and advance the work of the project. I will explain how I established short feedback loops to adapt quickly and employed regular inspection of project work to detect issues and pursue improvements. First, I put into place an interim solution to equip the warehouse while we waited for the new units. I also asked the vendor to keep us in mind should anything come available. Soon after, I got word that a GameStop warehouse based in California had just canceled an order of 2 units that were set to deliver in a matter of weeks. So the plan changed in a positive way. I was able to acquire the equipment sooner than expected. As soon as the warehouse racking system was in place, I asked the logistics specialist to test drive the new warehouse space and give me feedback. To my dismay, I witnessed something very concerning in 2 out of the 4 warehouse aisles. The lift visually was shaking as the driver drove down the aisles and went up the elevator. It came to my attention that the brand new flooring was not as even or flat as expected, but because I had built in buffer to the project budget and schedule and had been diligent in detecting the setback, I was able to schedule the floor company to come in and refinish the aisles within the project budget and schedule. This avoided any adverse impacts to the other interdependent deliverables in the project. In this case, I fulfilled the principle of adaptability and resiliency by responding to the external changing conditions, getting in position to seize the opportunity to acquire the swing reach truck sooner, and by recovering quickly from the unexpected setback of an unsatisfactory floor condition for safe and comfortable operation. A few years ago, I attended a trade show in Chicago to shop equipment that could help our operations team work more efficiently and ergonomically. One of the systems I ended up pursuing for the project was an auto bagger. This machine is designed to print a label directly onto a recyclable plastic bag, dispense it, open it, facilitate the product loading, seal that bag, and then feed it down the line. Everything seemed to be going fine until I was advised by the manufacturer that due to their company being acquired and ongoing internal changes, one of the pieces of equipment we had ordered would deliver in 8 to 10 months instead of 8 weeks. I engaged the distributor and my project team openly and transparently to explore ideas. These conversations generated an idea, and I asked the distributor to search his network for a used unit on the market. Within a week, he had found a functioning unit at a low price, and I was able to work into the project budget and get it nearly a year before we ended up receiving the new one. By adapting to the circumstances and leveraging a new way of thinking about how to acquire the equipment, negative impacts were mitigated and the project was delivered successfully. This example demonstrates the interconnection between adaptability and resiliency and change because I was able to respond to the changing conditions to recover to a setback while supporting the team's transition to the future state of working and promoting adoption of the changes. By getting the equipment in early on in the project schedule, we're able to take our time in developing the process side by side with the team members who would ultimately be responsible for using that equipment. This helped them embrace the change as they were committed and felt ownership. Next project management principle on the agenda is change. Change is meant to prepare those impacted for the adoption and sustainment of new and different behaviors and process required for the transition from the current state to the intended future state created by the project outcomes. A structured approach to change helps individuals, groups, and the organization transition from the current state to a future desired state. Change can originate from internal influences or external sources. Enabling change can be challenging as not all stakeholders embrace change. Attempting too much change in a short time can lead to change fatigue and or passive resistance, even active resistance. Stakeholder engagement and motivational approaches assist in change adoption. In developing leadership through emotional intelligence, I wrote and created a program artifact of personal reflections, emotional intelligence. In this document, I take a very honest evaluation of my current capabilities, feelings, and levels of different pillars of emotional intelligence. I also take a self-evaluation of where I stand currently in leadership. I then connect that to the ideal or the perceived ideals that I would like to reach in the future and begin by making a map. By identifying what the ideal is and being honest about where I currently am, I'm essentially making a roadmap to and a structured framework of how to get there, how to realize the change. In the Bauman VLM pilot project, it was strategically important for our organization, and it was a great opportunity for me to gain more experience with change. While there was an immediate deliverable to implement the machine and the Oracle interface, it was a structured approach here that took steps towards a future state. By starting with one machine and limiting the scope of work and exposure to risk, I fulfilled the principle of change by not trying to attempt too much change at once. This helped alleviate the potential for change fatigue from VL machines and when that would come about when executing the parts warehouse project. Being aware that I would be causing people to learn brand new ways of doing their job, I knew I had to involve them in the process as much as possible to promote commitment, buy-in, and more importantly, the adoption and sustainment of new and different behaviors and processes. I fulfilled the principle of change by intentionally and genuinely engaging the stakeholders who would ultimately create the narrative of either project success or failure. Over time, I built rapport, trust, and motivated the team members by explaining why their participation was important to realize the strategic goals of modernizing our operations. The pilot project was both successful as a standalone project and also as a means of helping the team transition into a future state. I have implemented a total of 5 of these machines now and will be doing 2 more later this year. The change originally was pursued as a strategic measure to respond to a number of challenges, including inventory control and accuracy, limited available floor space, non-ergonomic work processes, and a lack of traceability in operations. While the business case was clear, I was only able to realize it by carefully guiding the stakeholders to feel comfortable and embrace the changes, step by step. Not all of them were eager at the start, and there was a healthy amount of doubt and pushback regarding the changes. I remember some saying that they had worked before with a similar machine 20 years ago and it was nothing but problems. Or that they could do their job faster pushing a cart up and down aisles pulling parts from the traditional shelving units. When executing the project to upgrade and replace equipment in the shipping department, I fulfilled the principle of change again by first talking with the project stakeholders in the area that would be directly impacted and who would ultimately determine whether the project was successful or not. I do see I did seek to prepare them for the change that was coming and began by building important working relationships to open up the line of communication. I heard their questions and concerns and worked to address them. This gave me the invaluable opportunity to hear their perspectives, needs, ideas, and incorporate them into the actions, decisions, and changes that were happening within the project. After removing the old equipment and installing the new equipment, it was these stakeholders who I became especially grateful to be working for. Their daily work processes were literally changing, and they were participating in a very positive and enthusiastic way. They felt very comfortable letting me know their thoughts, concerns, and consistently responded. And I worked to consistently respond to make improvements or corrections. I quickly established a structure to respond to the process challenges and coordinated the involvement of these stakeholders. In one instance, after monitoring the process and collecting feedback, I suggested we make a change that was well received. So I scheduled a site visit from a technician to update the PLC programming and automate some of the equipment's movements. This was done to save the user's time and make the process more efficient. Instead of having to step on a foot pedal and leave it to press for 10 or 12 seconds on each cycle of rotating the table, they could just push a button and walk away to proceed with other tasks. Again, by preparing the team to adopt and sustain the change, by being involved with the project and making sure to value their input, I was able to fulfill the principle of change. I would now like to discuss my professional project management identity, and it has developed over many years of experience and become rooted in my personal convictions, professional ethical standards, the skills I possess, and the reputation I cultivate on a daily basis through my engagements. My proficiencies in communication, systems thinking, organization, and strategy are fortified by adhering to the PMI Code of Ethics. The ethical standards include responsibility, respect, fairness, and honesty. Responsibility is defined as our duty to take ownership for the decisions and actions we make or fail to make, as well as the consequences that result. Being a responsible project manager and leader means that when I make decisions and take actions, I do so not in the best interest of myself, but in the best interest of stakeholders, society, public safety, and the environment we all share. As such, excuse me. As such, responsibility requires that I do not attempt to take on projects that are beyond my technical skills, background, experience, or qualifications. By cultivating both self-awareness and situational awareness, I am effective in my decision making so that I can guide project teams efficiently and ethically. This happens when I strategically leverage the strengths of my peers to maximize positive project outcomes. And it is also reflected in my commitment to risk management, where vigilant monitoring and evaluation position me to detect threats, deploy mitigation efforts, and leverage opportunities to protect stakeholders' interests. Respect is defined as our duty to show a high regard for ourselves, others, and the resources entrusted to us, including people, money, reputation, the safety of others, and natural or environmental resources. Respect is about fostering and protecting the psychological and physical safety of others, valuing diverse perspectives, and leveraging collaboration throughout project engagements. I aspire to adhere to respect when I genuinely build relationships with my colleagues and stakeholders, and by investing time and effort to support their ideas and contributions. Respect requires empowering those around me. It requires safeguarding the community, environment, and the economy. And it requires to not only limit my stewardship to those that I come in direct contact with, but to maintain a strong connection to the many domains in which I live. The cornerstone of my identity is respectful communication and ensuring mutual respect and trust developed organically through being transparent, keeping to my commitments, and encouraging the kind of dialogue where opposing ideas can be held safely in tension to generate an even better one. Fairness is defined as our duty to make decisions and act impartially and objectively. Our conduct must be free from competing self-interest, prejudice, and favoritism. I practice fairness as a project manager by being transparent in my decision-making process, the ethical handling and disclosing any real or potential conflicts of interest, by constantly seeking to identify and resolve personal bias to remain impartial and objective. Also, by steering clear of any form of favoritism or discrimination, and by fostering information sharing appropriately and making opportunities equally available to qualified candidates. I practice fairness by refraining from judgment while communicating to gain practical understanding. In doing so, I integrate the insights of project team members and other stakeholders into project decisions so that solutions are developed in balance with others. Honesty is defined as our duty to understand the truth and act in a truthful manner, both in our communications and our conduct. My professional identity is deeply rooted in the honesty I practice in my communication, engagements, and actions. I earnestly seek to understand the truth so that I can provide accurate information in a timely manner. As a project leader, I foster an environment where others feel safe to tell the truth, even when it is bad news. I do this by reassuring them that it will be okay, keeping to my commitments, and by openly communicating my own mistakes, errors, or oversights in a timely manner. Doing so not only safeguards my own integrity, but also the project's integrity and shows genuine respect for others. And it is in this authenticity that I build my professional identity. So I'd like to share a few examples or reinforce some examples, better said, that I've shared and connect them to these principles. In both the Sustainability Management Plan and in the CAMFOL or nearshoring projects, I was able to exhibit responsibility. In the Sustainability Management Plan, I took responsibility for not only the environmental impacts of the decisions and the project life cycle, but also the responsibility of the processes and how those would affect stakeholders. How ergonomic were things? How efficient were things? How enjoyable would the work be? It is in this way that I fulfilled the ethic of responsibility. For respect, in the key leadership growth essay, I emphasize clear communication, honest communication. It is these things that I believe is the foundation for respect as it pertains to interpersonal relationships and positive project performance. In the Emerson Parts Warehouse plant floor replacement, I exercised and fulfilled respect by considering the impact that the fumes would have on the stakeholders and working diligently to prevent any issues. In the analysis of the deadline, a novel about project management, in my analysis of the deadline, a novel about project management, the project manager exhibits fairness as he navigates some ethical challenges successfully and adheres to this code of ethic. In a recent project, I was taking part in identifying a piece of equipment called a hydro test bench, and we were trying to replace an existing one in the building. I was working with another engineer, and we were trying to find the best option. Well, when I became aware that I was a little bit biased about the one I had found over his, I recused myself from the decision-making process to be fair and make sure that we were objectively looking at the best option. In our program artifact I created, Leading Integrative Teams with Commitment and Trust, the topic connects how project commitment and trust facilitate knowledge sharing. Trust is built on honesty, and over time becomes part of the team culture. In the parts warehouse high bay racking system, I had to exercise and fulfill honesty there by quickly sharing the bad news that the racks were not meeting acceptance criteria and that we were going to have to incur some cost. Next, I would like to discuss some of my personal professional goals as it pertains to project management principles and code of ethics. Excuse me. Before I do, the integration of responsibility, respect, fairness, and honesty with project management practices strengthens stakeholder engagement, team morale, and overall project effectiveness. My journey in embracing the tolerance of ambiguity has refined my skills and thinking patterns. As I aspire to leverage different leadership styles and empower project team members and organizations, the Code of Ethics and project management principles provide a firm foundation that enables me to operate from a position of trust and authenticity. My weapons of choice are effective, clear, and honest communication, self-awareness, and systems thinking, an emotionally intelligent leadership that constantly exhibits ethical behavior, firm understanding, and clear direction, even amidst uncertainty. In conclusion, aligning my project management identity with the PMI Code of Ethics and Principles elevates my practice above my technical skills. Strategy and sound decision making are products of fostering collaboration, innovation, and trust. Next, I would like to share my short-term and long-term goals as they pertains to my personal professional goals in project management. In the short term, I'd like to create a self-assessment to evaluate my adherence to the PMBOK PM principles and code of ethics. I'd like to solicit feedback from colleagues, leaders, and stakeholders to better understand how well I am complying or fulfilling the principles and codes of ethics. I want to include an evaluation of adherence to key project management principles in project retrospective reports that I make in the near future. And I'd like to schedule focused lunch and learns with colleagues to discuss project management principles and codes of ethics. In the long term, I would like to use that self-assessment I created and conduct a self-assessment on an annual basis and seek the objective feedback from my colleagues. This will help me to gauge where I have opportunities for improvement and also probably make me feel good about the ones I'm doing well on. I'd also like to study for my PMP certification and test within the next 6 months. I'd like to read 10 books covering different aspects of leadership development. as I believe this will help me continue to sharpen my knowledge and understanding. I would also like to incorporate project management principles as qualitative project performance metrics wherever possible. That's going to take a little bit of creativity, but when I figure out how to do that effectively and efficiently, I think it's going to be pretty good. In conclusion, I'd like to say thank you very much for watching this presentation and joining the meeting today. We have covered all the agenda of the program, and I am very excited to move forward in my project management career. I'm going to leave with this quote, and it was shared by Greg Reed. A dream written down with a date becomes a goal. A goal breaking down into steps becomes a plan. And a plan backed by action makes your dreams come true. And that is one of my dreams here coming true. Thank you very much and take care.